Acceptable living and grace. In your quest to live an acceptable, holy life before God, you have to know that you will have to incorporate the grace of God to do so. How do you know this? You know this from Hebrews chapter 12, verse 28. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 28, KJV, states, "Therefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear." From this verse, it is 100% clear and present that the grace of God is the supernatural force that allows the believer to serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. If one is looking to serve God acceptably, in holiness and in godly sexual purity, they will have to incorporate the grace of God into their life equation every day. When holy living is discussed, it is critically important to also discuss the grace of God, as only the grace will allow someone to live a life of sexual purity and holiness which is acceptable unto God. If you want to live acceptably unto God, you have to incorporate the grace of God into and on your life every day. Euarestos. What does it mean to serve God acceptably? To answer that question, the verse of Hebrews chapter 12 verse 8 must be studied. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 28, KJV, states, "Therefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear." The word acceptably from Hebrews chapter 12 verse 28 is from the Greek word euarestos. The Greek word euarestos is defined as, in a manner well-pleasing to one, acceptable. Blue Letter Bible, 2016. From the above definition bullet points of the Greek word euarestos, it is evident that the grace of God supernaturally enables you to live a life that is well-pleasing to God and acceptable to God in the midst of this day and age of evil, sexual sin, ungodliness, and sexual sin temptation. Never think that the sexual sin temptation of today is too much to overcome. Always know that in the midst of the sexual sin temptation that exists, the grace of God has been made available to you to ensure that you serve God acceptably and in a manner that is well-pleasing to Him. Eidos. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 28 KJV states, "Therefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear." What does it mean to serve God with reverence? The word reverence from Hebrews chapter 12 verse 28 is from the Greek word eidos. The Greek word eidos is defined as respect, honor, reverence. Blue Letter Bible, 2016. From the above definition, bullet points of the Greek word eidos from Hebrews chapter 12 verse 28, it is evident that the grace of God supernaturally enables you to serve God with authentic respect, honor, and reverence in this day and age of sexual sin temptation, evil, and ungodliness. In order for you to serve God acceptably and with reverence, honor, and respect, you will need the grace of God working in your life. Teaches you to say no. Titus chapter 2 verses 11 through 12 NIV states, "For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people." Verse 12, it teaches you to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. From these verses, it should be evident that you need to have the grace of God operating in your life if you wish to live a truly godly, upright life, free of sexual activity outside of marriage, sexual sin. Why? Because, from the above verses, the grace is that supernatural force that teaches you to say no to encountered ungodliness and worldly passions in this present age of sexual sin prevalence and ungodliness. In addition, you know that the grace also enables you to live a self-controlled life, an upright life, and a godly life in this present day and age of ungodliness and immorality. God knows that as you live in this ungodly world, you will be faced with things that you need to say no to in order to maintain holiness and to stay sexual sin free. As a result, He has provided the grace of God as that supernatural force that will teach you to say no to the ungodliness that you encounter in this world. Understand that you need the grace of God to live the life of holiness and sexual purity that God has called you to live, where you do not engage in sexual activity outside of marriage, sexual sin. It is not about your strength and power being used to live a holy life of sexual purity. It is about the grace of God supernaturally enabling you to live the life of holiness and sexual purity that God has called you to live. Agitating passions and moral conflicts. 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 2 AMPC. May grace, God's favor, and peace, which is perfect well-being, all necessary good, all spiritual prosperity, and freedom from fears and agitating passions and moral conflicts, be multiplied to you in the full, personal, precise, and correct knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord. On your journey to live a life of true godly holiness that is free from sexual sin activity, it is important for you to know that you will encounter agitating passions and moral conflicts. So when you do encounter tempting agitating passions and moral conflicts, what do? From the above verse, it should be clear that the grace of God and God's peace has been made available to you to assist you in overcoming, as opposed to falling victim to, agitating passions, that is, of a sexual activity outside of marriage nature, and moral conflicts, that is, of a sexual activity outside of marriage nature. In addition, you also know from the above verse that the grace of God and God's peace has been made available to provide you with perfect well-being, all necessary good, and all spiritual prosperity. This should clearly show you how important it is for you to utilize the grace of God as you seek to live a holy life that is free from sexual activity outside of marriage. All things needed. 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 3 AMPC. For His divine power has bestowed upon us all things that are requisite and suited to the life and godliness, through the full personal knowledge of Him who called us by and to His own glory and excellence, virtue. As you strive to live a life of godliness that is free from all aspects of sexual activity outside of marriage, it is important for you to know that you will need certain things, that is, godly strength against sexual sin, godly wisdom against sexual sin, godly discretion against sexual sin, etc. And with that said, the above verse clearly teaches that His divine power, grace, has bestowed upon us all things that are requisite and suited to live the life of godliness. Whatever you need to live a life of true godliness that is free from sexual activity outside of marriage, know that it is the grace that has been made available to provide you with those things. The grace is critical to live a godly life that is free from sexual activity outside of marriage.
Available on hardcover, audiobook, and ebook. Get yours today from Amazon, and be sure to visit us at whatgodsaysministries.com.